comparison between the Motorola G30 and the newer Motorola G60s. Now both of these phones are currently sub £200 smartphones, with the G60s being available on Amazon right now on a Black Friday deal for £179. So if you're interested in that phone, get it now, as £179 is an absolute steal for this phone. The G30 is available for its normal selling price of around £160. Now I'm not going to bore you with the specs of both of these phones, so here they are up on the screen to refresh your memories. So I'm just going to dive straight into my comparison between these two phones, with the G60s photos being on the left and the G30 photos being on the right. Now in this first photo I was out on a walk, thought I'd take a photo directly into the sun through the trees. Both phones do a pretty decent job of retaining the blue sky and the details of the tree and the bushes. But one thing to note is I had HDR on for all of these photos, as this would produce the best photos in brighter conditions. There is a bit of lens flare, but that's to be expected at this price. The next photo in my garden, again against the sun, HDR does a good job of controlling the harsh light, preserving good amounts of detail of the hanging basket, and you can see the G30 photo is a little bit brighter, but the G60s has a slightly warmer feel to it. Both perfectly usable photos. These next two are almost identical, especially in detail and depth of field. The main difference here is the colour temperature. I think the G30 has a slightly more saturated look, but in this case I think I prefer the G60s. It's a similar result in these photos, with the G30 having more saturated results, again with detail being about the same. The G60s has the benefit of having a 5 megapixel macro camera over the 2 megapixel of the G30, but I didn't see a huge difference between the two in this shot, and actually to my eyes the G30 photo looks more detailed, and both photos however are a bit dull in comparison to the main. Both photos of the main camera of my garden look very similar, with good detail and natural colour. The G60s ever so slightly more saturated, but nothing too excessive. And just to note, I have turned Scene Optimizer off for all of these photos as well. Switching to the wide angle camera, and you definitely get a more saturated image from the G60s, and to me it does look slightly more detailed than the G30, especially in the foreground plants. I like both of these photos about the same. Another HDR scene sees both phones producing very different looking photos. In this case I prefer the look of the G60s, despite the G30 looking brighter around the patio heater and on the fence. I think the G60s photo has a little bit more character. And now on to nighttime photos. Of course, with most phones these days, the use of pixel binning improves standard low light photography anyway, and the G60s produces a warmer photo, especially when looking at the conservatory lights. And then switching to night mode, this is even more apparent. Detail isn't great on either, but exposure is of course improved, and notice the green colouring to the G30 photo. I do prefer the G60s on this occasion. And this photo has some Christmas lights. The G30 goes a little bit too far in my opinion, brightening the photo. The G60s is more reserved, but sadly detail on both isn't spectacular, but at this price you can't really complain. And selfie photos look very similar, although the G30 smooths out my skin more than the G60s, but the blue sky is more saturated and slightly more exposed. Detail wise the G60s wins here, and portrait mode I also have to give to the G60s. HDR did a slightly better job in handling the bright conditions, and separation is better all round. Now I can't stress enough that of course these opinions of these photos are my own opinions, but like I said before, be sure to let me know in the comments your preferences of these photos. And now let's take a quick look at video. Okay, so testing out video on both the front facing camera of the G60s and the G30. Here on the G30, video tops out at 1080p at 30 frames per second, whereas on the G60s it in fact tops out at 4K at 30 FPS. So video quality from both looks pretty good, and we'll see how the audio pickup is. Now here's some video recording from both the main cameras on both of these phones. Now on the stock Motorola camera app, I couldn't actually find a way of changing the video quality up to the 4K which you'll get on the G60s. So on the default camera app, video recording does default to 1080p. So I'm not quite sure on how you can change the quality on the G60s without downloading a third-party app. The video recording is pretty good, and let's see how the audio pickup is again on both of these phones. Now, despite the G30 having image stabilization on both the main and the ultra-wide cameras, I didn't find that the stabilization on the G30 video was particularly great. On the G60 as well, I didn't find that the video stabilization was very good. Not sure actually if it comes with stabilization on there, but if the G30 does, it would make sense that the G60s does as well. So video quality from both is good. Audio pickup is good, but in terms of image stabilization, neither phone performs particularly well in that area. Okay, so that's my more in-depth look at the Motorola G60s and G30's cameras. I think that both phones produce some really nice photos, and in certain situations I preferred the G60s, in other situations I preferred the G30. So for everyday use, both of these phones are pretty decent. In low light, of course, with other budget smartphones is where they generally fall down the most. Ultra wide photos from the G60s I found to be consistently better looking than what the G30 produced, but they were still pretty good as well. But let me know in the comments what you think, and the video on both phones looks pretty nice, but the stabilization wasn't great on either, even dropping down to 1080p. So that's something that, to be honest, you're not going to expect huge amounts from budget phones anyway. But again, let me know in the comments what you think of the results of this video. Is this something that you'd like to see more of? Please let me know in the comments below. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.